they're still driving the car, but I'm just the navigator now. Hi again, Helen.
Hi, Richard.
This is part 2. We just finished recording part 1, so there may be a gap between listening to part 1 and part 2. You may join us in part 2 and not have heard part 1, but in part 1 of this particular chat, we were talking about content creation, content sharing, all the good stuff around that. There were some really good things that came out of that discussion. So thanks, Helen, for your wisdom in that sense. Suggest if you haven't watched part 1, maybe you should go and watch part 1. And in part 2, I'm perhaps going to put myself in a bit of an uncomfortable position. I've been reading a lot about growth mindset and getting out of our comfort zone. So I'm going to do that right now, because I'm going to flip the tables around, and I'm going to give you permission to take me through a coaching session. You should believe you're pretty good at doing. And I'm just going to be the guinea pig, or in the hot seat, or whatever you want to call it, and let you just drive me around a specific part of my content creation program or agenda. I'll let you take over if you like. Would that be fair enough? Is that okay?
That sounds good to me. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the way to approach this is going to be as if this were the initial coaching session with somebody who's kind of signed up for the program. And obviously in that first session, what we need to work out is, where are we now, and what are your aims, and then we can work out how we can achieve those. So I guess the first thing we need to know is, who is this content aimed at?
Okay, that was the first question. Who is the content aimed at? Okay, so put a bit of context around it. I'm slightly different, because I already have some content, and I'm sharing content quite regularly and have been for some time. So this is it essentially. So this is a book I wrote 4 or 5 years ago, Property Investor Toolkit, and
Got it in my bookshelf.
Oh, fantastic! Great. It's a handy little guide, and it's still selling at the moment. And it's it's a fairly short book, as you can probably see, but it's got lots of external links and additional bonuses and resources. But it could do with a bit of an update. So I decided I wanted to update the Property Investor Toolkit. I want to add a couple of chapters, which I think would be beneficial to include in that. But to answer your specific question, who is it aimed at? So the Property Investor Toolkit is primarily aimed at new and aspiring or early stage property investors. So it's if you haven't yet got your first investment, or you perhaps have got 1, maybe 2 or 3, and are looking to sort of progress up the sort of property ladder, so to speak. So it's still, either before you've started or just after you've started, that kind of thing. So we're not talking about people becoming a full-time property developer. We're not talking about people becoming a deal sourcer. We're talking about investors either looking to begin or have made a bit of a start and just want to go on a little bit further to the next level. Yeah,
brilliant. And that was exactly where I was when I bought that book some years ago now. So it was brilliant. But having said that, I can see that we're in quite a different context now. Things have, the market conditions have definitely changed quite a lot. So I can see why you would want to update it a bit. So where does it fit into your goals, personally and professionally?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess, first of all, my purpose, to start there, is I think my overall purpose is to share my knowledge with people to help them progress in their journey. If I wasn't doing this, I might be a teacher, for example, or something like that. I think it's just something that I consistently do. So it's part of my overall purpose. That's for a start. The second thing is, when I started out in property myself a few years ago now, I was trying to do some research rather, and to be honest with you, it was a bit different back then, to be fair, but there was a lot of information out there, but it was difficult to assimilate and assemble in a simple format certainly in a way that was legal, first of all. So, you know, I think it's a case of trying to just simplify the message, condense it into, you know, what I call realistic, you know, down to earth, practical guide, so that people can just follow, you know, pick up something and follow it. I actually had someone recently, someone bought the book, and they said, I'm going to keep it next to my desk because it's almost like a Bible to refer to. That's the intention. So that, and why do I want to do that? Well, so one is to give, but the get part of it is some of those people might want a little bit of extra support beyond just reading a book. So I'm writing the book so they can just run with it on their own. They're not, you know, hooked into me. I don't, you know, I don't withhold any secrets. You know, it's all there. But, you know, perhaps there are other benefits people might want to have, such as, you know, having a bit of support and accountability, having a bit of guidance from somebody who's been there and done it, who can help de-risk their journey, help them make a good decision, not necessarily a bad decision, as they're starting out or as they're at the early stages. So I do offer some mentoring services for a limited number of people or small number of people. And so some of those people who read the book might go on perhaps to ask, you know, to do that sort of thing. I also have a secondary service, which is called Property Deal Tips.
Yeah.
Now, it's a fairly low cost subscription service. These are on market deals, transactions, property deals, which I don't charge a fee for. They're just there on the open market. They're all capable of achieving a 10% return on investment or more. It covers buy to let, buy, refurbish, refinance, and flips. So it's a subscription service which can help those sort of people to narrow down relatively good income generating or profit generating opportunities. So that would be the get. So I would give the content, and in return, perhaps for some of those people where it's relevant, perhaps a bit of mentoring, perhaps a bit of the deal tip service would be where I'd probably take that. So that's the goals in general speaking. Sorry, they're the objective rather than the goals. I know you said goals, so I haven't attached numbers and dates to that, but I could, and I do have it, but probably not going to share it in this format.
Yeah, no problem. That's great. So once you have those things, I guess when we're talking of, if we go back to that first point about who it's aimed at, so it's new and aspiring property investors. So we would, at this point, you know, start to create a complete avatar, a reader avatar. And one of the things that we would be thinking about is what format would this person want the information in? And I always, again, one of the very first things that I ask, particularly, you know, book coaching clients to do is to complete customer research and competitor research. And so if you have an audience already, you know, ask them what format would you like this to be in? And that, you know, it could be a long form book, it could be a short form series of short form books or workbooks even. You know, do they want it to be on like Audible and as an audio book? You know, what as an ebook, as something that's printed on paper? How do they want that book? So do you have any ideas about that right now, or?
So, well, there's maybe two halves to that. One is the avatar itself, right? And then the other one is the format. So shall I just start with the avatar side of it, maybe?
Yes, let's go into that.
Well, okay, so I've got perhaps a couple of different avatars. So the first one would be typically, I don't know why I've actually said this is male, but 32 to 40, age 32 to 40. The old term would be yuppie.
Yeah.
I don't know what the modern equivalent is, but basically, you know, someone who is, you know, aspirational, perhaps on a career path, and is starting to think about either income replacement or retirement, and maybe helping other people along the way. So 32 to 40, probably, but not exclusively male, actually, probably a homeowner, They may have a couple of investments already, actually, 0 to 3. And they want to maybe achieve something in the order of 1,000 to 5,000 a month in income replacement within 5 to 10 years. So they're also interested in things like legacy. They want a bit of hand-holding to de-risk their decision-making, if you like. They might be into things like health, finance, personal finance, personal development, that sort of thing. I've got even, some clues as to what kind of stores they might shop in and cars they might drive. But that would be one example there. And then similarly, I've got what I call a second stage of lifer. I don't know if this is a proper way to describe these people, but that might be a little perhaps female, 38 to 48, maybe just haven't got any properties yet, or maybe got one. Again, income today might be important to that person, 1 to 3,000 a month, and maybe lacking a bit of confidence would be one of the biggest sort of pain points that you talked about in our first conversation. And there's certainly, maybe looking out for other people, maybe it's children, for example. So that's just a couple of examples. I've got some other ones, but maybe just that would be the sorts of people. So that yuppie, or the second stage of lifer, that maybe I should come up with a different description, but I kind of know what that then looks like. So, one's a little bit younger, one's male, one's female. So if I start to think about where they might hang out, what information they might read, so not necessarily read, but how they might consume information, they may be slightly different, actually. So I guess there's a bias because I have an existing audience which is predominantly built up through either my podcasts or my written material. So the bias being that people have listened to my podcast, so like audio content, or have read my books and my magazine articles and therefore like written content. But so I haven't really tested other media formats too much. But my initial thought process, which I think I've just taken one takeaway already, actually, is for me to test. And you said so. But something I would like to test is the idea of having a series, rather than having just this book, is to have a mini series of more short form, 3,000 word type articles, not articles, mini books. And to also convert those into audiobook format. I think that's likely to resonate with my existing audience already, a bit of a crossover, especially I haven't got this book in audiobook format. So that would be a good thing, just to do that. And then, so that's kind of building on what I already have. I haven't really thought too much about taking it beyond those sorts of media formats, and that's quite stimulating that you've asked me that question, actually.
Well, as we've kind of said in part one, people tend, for a variety of reasons, to enjoy consuming information in different ways. It's quite a personal thing. So if the book isn't available in audio format at the moment, then you will undoubtedly be missing out on a part, an audience that you could be tapping into and sharing your knowledge with. I like the thought of this kind of these short form books. I think when you're teaching people something, which you effectively are, in this book, if you can showcase the theory and then move on to kind of practical exercises that are relevant to them, then that's going to be a really powerful way of getting that information across. Because I think fundamentally that's how we learn. Most people learn best, I think, by actually applying the knowledge to their own circumstances. So I think that'll be good.
So that's already given me some extra things to think about, so appreciate that.
That's all right, no worries. So I guess then kind of fast forwarding somewhat, because I would have sent you off to do your research.
Okay.
Customer research, your competitor research, looking at what other similar books in your sector, what did reviewers on Amazon say enjoy about those books, and of the look at the 5-star reviews, look at the 1-star reviews, and see what did people not like, and are there any opportunities for you to create a better book that addresses some of those gaps? I mean, to be fair, I think there are a heck of a lot of badly written property books. So I think it's often simple stuff like spelling and grammar. People are like, "Oh God, it was written so badly. It was awful." But anyway, but what we would really like to identify is gaps in the knowledge, gaps in the content.
Sure. I think that's, first of all, by the way, that in itself is interesting, because as someone who actually had to have extra English lessons at school, I don't have perfect grammar. And so for me, it was already a feat that I write at all, actually. So I kind of perhaps had a bit of a self-image issue as a result of what happened in my long ago school days. And yet I managed to write a book some 30 years later. So it probably does have the odd typo or grammatical error. But what you've just flagged to me is perhaps the importance of having it proofread.
Yeah, so, absolutely. And I think I really want people to feel that they can do this. They can write a book. Just think of all those, celebrities who ostensibly have books to their name. Are they all great writers? No, they're not. Some of them will undoubtedly have used ghostwriters, and that's fair enough. You might not have the time, you might not have the writing ability, you might not have the confidence. Or they've just got damn good editors.
Yeah, so it is important that, because I having looked at things like personality profiles, I know that certain people get really switched off with errors and grammatical points. So I think you can try and keep them on board just by doing a simple proofread or have it edited. So that's again a good tip.
I'm not, I am not God's gift to proofreading and editing myself. I'm more of a kind of creative writer. I do, I can't help myself, but pick up, some errors when I'm reviewing client copy. But it is, quite a specialist skill set, and I would never say, if I proofread. Well, I wouldn't ever say I will proofread your manuscript, because, as I say, it is quite a specialist skill set. And then editing is kind of a bit different. Editors are the red pen people who will not only pick up on spelling and grammar errors, but actually it's for them, it's more about structure and tone and consistency and a coherent story, that sort of thing. And that's something that I help my clients with as a matter of course. That's kind of my job, really, as a book coach, is to help with structure, which kind of leads quite nicely on. If we are fast forwarding, it might be useful to pick a chapter or one of these short form workbooks, and just go through how we would look at structuring that. So I like to look at the basis of this is in the Reuters style guide, and it's how they tell their journalists to structure a story, but I've added a bit to it because I think it's important. So whenever we're looking to tell a story, and this could be like a press release or an article or a blog post or a social media post or even a book, we need to work out who, what, why, when, where, how, and importantly, so what. And if we can answer all of those questions, then that should help us to find the salient points of our story and work out what our story is. So once we've done that, then we can move on to structuring whatever it is. And fundamentally, just like an essay at school or a presentation, in the workplace, we're going to have an introduction where we're going to tell them what we're going to tell them, and then we'll have the main body of the content where we are going to tell them, and then we'll have a conclusion where we'll tell them what we told them. And then, in business, we're very likely to want to add in a call to action of some sort. So also a note about structure. If we're feeling overwhelmed at the thought of writing a book, and it might be interesting for your listeners to know that the average business or non-fiction book is between 30 and 50,000 words. So then if we think, okay, well, let's make this, for argument's sake, 10 chapters. One of those will be the introduction. One of them will be the conclusion, and we've got 8 chapters in the middle where we impart our information. So that's going to be an average of 3,000 to 5,000 words per chapter. Well, then we can start to break that down even further and think, okay, well, if I've got to write, 4,000 words, say, in this chapter, and I can break it down into this many paragraphs, of this much each-ish, then it just starts to look so much more manageable. So,
Indeed.
I think that's a really...
Thank you. Sorry that I jumped in. But I think want to go back to perhaps a little bit, you talked about the research phase. So one of the observations I had with the research was, I'm fortunate that I had a lot of very positive reviews for my own book. So I've got that learning. And I think there's a couple of negative ones. And one person thought it was too short. I can't remember what the other one thought, but but most people, like, not hundreds, but I think in the high tens of reviews were very positive, so that's good. But when I did look at some of the competitors, I noticed a couple of recurring themes. A lot of people were frustrated, perhaps, that the tell them and then tell them and tell them and tell them and all that stuff. Well, they didn't feel that they got enough, perhaps, from the book. So I kind of observed that and thought, well, I want to tell them everything. I don't want to hold anything back. So that's something there. So that's just one example of how I perhaps have looked at some of the competitive reviews and also how they position their books as well. I think to your point about the structure, absolutely. I'm fortunate here because I have an existing book. Okay, so I think I'm trying to look now. So it has how many chapters? It currently has 9 chapters. Yeah, 9. One of which is plus an intro. So that's 10 already. I'm going to add 2 extra chapters, so it will be 12. Yeah. I think a minimum of 2 extra chapters. But equally, I think the story idea is probably an area I can improve on with the second edition. And there's lots of ways you can do that, as you, I'm sure, are aware. But I remember reading, for example, recently the book called Cure by Jo Marchant. And she started every chapter with literally a personal story. And she shared, I met such and such and this, and she visually described, the environment, the person, etc., to set the scene for that particular chapter. So I'm not saying I will do exactly that, but I thought that was a really neat way to introduce someone to that particular element in her book. So I think the storytelling piece is a bit I can probably improve on in the second edition. So that's really good advice. Thank you.
Well, I've worked with several different property clients now, and I can tell you that one of the biggest gripes when people bought a property book was there isn't enough actual depth of actionable information in here because they're trying to flog me their course. that was like top of the list. But I know obviously that does not apply to you.
Well, I mean, I have follow-on services, Helen. So there's a temptation to hold something back, but I don't have a training course. So I have mentoring, but I actually believe it's the opposite. So if I can showcase and give away as much as possible in the book that they could actually run with it themselves, people might still choose to contact me because I've been able to showcase my knowledge. And what they're going to get through maybe, let's say, mentoring support is something different. They're going to get the benefit of my experience to sit alongside them. I call it, I'm navigating whilst they drive, for example. So they're still driving the car, but I'm just a navigator now. Whereas if you imagine trying to drive the car and read the book at the same time, you're probably going to crash. So, so I don't want to hold things back. And in fact, in a way, I want to do the opposite. I want to include as much as possible, give as many resources as possible, so they can actually go and do it themselves if that's what they'd like to do.
Absolutely. So I wanted to share that, not because I think you're guilty of this, because I don't. I've read your books. I know you give so much. But yeah, that is what a lot of property books are, is kind of thinly veiled sales material for training courses. And yeah, don't treat your readers like mugs. It's so transparent. So yeah, I don't think that's a good idea.
So you were going to take me down a path of breaking it down, for example. So breaking it down to chapters and with the intro, etc. Or the chapters in my case will be the short form book. Were you going to take me down a path of how to perhaps build that? Maybe how I go about writing and the format, but not the sort of format. I mean, how I would get from 0 to 3,000 words to then 30 to 50,000 words. Were you going to take me down that path?
Yeah, I mean, it does. Obviously, this is really dependent on what you're doing. But if I don't know, if you're willing to tell me what maybe one of the short books would be about, if you see what I mean.
You want something to go on, huh?
Yes, I'm afraid so.
So,
I mean, I'm like finance is, I would imagine.
So finance is definitely one of them. So, property finance, property investment financing would be one. In fact, actually, it's one that's not in the original.
Oh,
right. So I talk about property financials. I talk about property as an investment. I talk about criteria and calculations. So I have topics around that topic, but I don't talk about necessarily buy-to-let mortgages and bridging finance, which I will do in the new book. So finance is a big area of property investment, but it breaks down into a number of subsections. So if we take the financing piece, that perhaps, were you meaning things like mortgages and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if this series is aimed at new and aspiring property investors, this is going to be really important to them. So I guess it's so there's going to be an introduction. So why is finance so important, and maybe going into an overview of some of the ways that you could finance property investments of different types. Then you would want to move into more detail about that, and so perhaps you've given an overview in this introduction, and so there might now be a paragraph for each of those points. So maybe it's like, I don't know, obviously I'm not the expert here.
Well, shall I dive in with that? Just
dive in. Help me out.
So we're talking about conventional property investment here. By that I mean buy to let and that type of, but maybe it's flips and maybe it's those sort of rental types of properties rather than anything sort of a bit more out there. So typically what you need is a deposit funding if you don't have funding for the whole property. So you either need enough money to fund the entire project in cash, or you need a deposit to combine it with some kind of financing. With financing, you've typically got options like buy-to-let mortgage, you've got bridging finance, you've got a hybrid actually called bridge-to-let. So that's a two-stage sort of financing product. And then you've got some, so obviously I mentioned cash, but you've got some variations on a theme, like what I call alternative ways to raise money. So you've got things like peer-to-peer lending platforms. You've also got good old friends and family. And then, getting a little bit out there, you've got some joint venture partners who, perhaps you could attract as well. They're the sort of main categories in this area. Off the top of my head, there might be a couple of extra ones, but they would be the main ones.
Great. So then I would probably, you would be looking to write at least a paragraph about each of those different possibilities. The other thing we're also wanting to do is to try and break up walls of text and to kind of underscore learning by highlighting maybe key facts or something. So it might be that at the end of each paragraph where you're effectively teaching something, you might have a kind of key fact or top tip and then maybe a top pitfall as well, for each thing. So you are wanting to impart the information in this tell them section, but then you're going to want them to maybe do some sort of an analysis or audit of where they are as part of the practical section. And it might say something like checklists might be good here. Also,
I've got a couple of ideas already there. So, for example, with deposit raising, it could be there's a couple of steps that you could go through. So you could save, you could generate additional income, you could sell old stuff on eBay and car boots and things like that. Just low-hanging fruit ways of starting that process. So I can maybe keep it simple and go, here's some of the common ways to raise money for a deposit, for example, as a little checklist or a summary. And similarly, if you're thinking about bridging finance, a lot of people go, bridging finance, scary. So I could talk about the pros and cons of, bridging finance, and maybe the cons aren't quite as scary as people think they are. But people think it's expensive. People think these guys are, going to come in and just snatch their property away for no particular reason. It's not the case, but it's not the case as long as you pay them back, But with any form of financing, whether it's a car or a TV or a house, so someone's going to come and take it back if you don't pay them back for it.
Yeah, and I think there's also an important opportunity here for book bonuses as well. We want to be thinking, okay, so some of this stuff is going to go in the book, but maybe there's things, so like a dynamic spreadsheet, which you are not going to be able to put in a print book, obviously, or maybe it's you would print a table format in the book where people can sort of add in their own figures and stuff. But if they want a dynamic version, then they need to get in touch with you, give you their email address, and you'd be able to give them that.
Sure. I mean, that's something I actually had with the first book anyway, as you will know, both of those things. So there were some tables in there with illustrations, but equally people could get the templates for things like spreadsheets just by writing in. And of course, it's not lost on me. Well, it was lost on me until I realized what was happening, that when people were starting to connect with me and going, hey, I've got your book, can I have your spreadsheet, please? That then I knew who they were. So I wouldn't have known otherwise, would I? They would just bought the book, maybe I never have heard of them, or they, again. So there was an advantage there. So I stumbled across that, but apparently that seems to be quite a thing, to have people contact you so they can get bonuses, and then you can start a conversation
absolutely, because that's the great thing about books. But writing a book is it's a good way of ensuring that you have a legacy, of your work, because people will often hand on a physical book and it will go through several different people over years. But by the same token, then you don't know who's read it.
Right.
Even if you were to know the person you've sold it to, from that point onwards, this book might go on a completely different journey, and you'll know none of those additional destinations.
Yeah. Okay, so that's given me some good thought there. What should I be thinking of next?
So I guess 3,000 to 5,000 words is not a massive amount of words, actually. So if you're writing a book about property finance, so you've got your introduction, you've then gone into detail about the key points. You might want to also go into things that people might be wondering about, but that actually aren't appropriate for this group. So new and aspiring investors. So maybe they're interested in HMOs, and maybe you're going to need to say, well, actually, as things stand, if you don't have an existing buy-to-let property, then lenders are not going to lend to a first-time HMO landlord. They like to have seen that you've got some experience and understanding of property first before they, etc., etc. And you might also want to add in some case studies. I think that's, again, it's a powerful way of showing how the theory that you're teaching was used in practice, and it's finding that balance. So where do those things fit then? Is it we do the kind of imparting of the information, then we do the case study, then we ask the reader to go through the tools and worksheets, and then maybe we end with a conclusion, telling them what we told them. That's probably what I would say.
Okay, sounds good. And as you say, a call to action.
Yes.
So the call to action, of course, it was in this case would be the end of every short form book. So the end of every 3,000 to 5,000 words would have a call to action, which is related to that particular theme.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess you would also you want to be making sure that people know that you've got a podcast as well, for regular property investment information. Don't forget, you can sign up to the podcast. Also, this is a series of books, so we want to be signposting them to the other books in the series, perhaps giving them a reason to get in touch so they can buy a bundle from you directly, maybe at a discount or something like that. Or get extra bonuses. Discounts not always the best thing. Maybe they get something special. Maybe if they buy the bundle, they get a free half-hour coaching session by video with you, or something like that, or mentoring session. I don't know. Kind of ask me anything. Half-hour session. I don't know. Something like that. If they sign up for the whole bundle. So yeah.
I'm making notes as as you're talking. That's why I'm looking over here, which is where my pad is. Wasn't reading the news or anything.
So yeah, I mean, I think obviously with the information that we I have, and in this particular context, it's not exactly how it would be in a genuine kind of coaching session, but hopefully that's been helpful.
It has been helpful. It's been really good. And I was just, sorry if it's my particular situation is maybe taking us down a certain path, but I think you did say something, whether it was in this call or the previous call, about effectively starting where that person is in having the fact find. Now it just so happens I've written a book, I've got an audience, and I know kind of what I want to write and who for, sort of thing. So you would, if people weren't clear on that, you'd take them in more detail, wouldn't you, through those initial steps?
Yeah, funnily enough, when I started offering the book coaching service, I assumed that people would be coming to me and they wouldn't have written anything. They wouldn't have put pen to paper. It was an idea of something they wanted to do. But the reality has not been that. So, there's a lady called Bronwyn Verncombe who I've coached to write a book about property investment, which will be out at the end of this month. And she had already written nearly a third of a book by the time she came to me. And I really ummed and ahed about, gosh, is she going to get much value from the book coaching program because she's quite far in? And yes, she did. She absolutely did. And she said to me, Helen, you need to make sure that people know that your service doesn't just work for people who haven't put pen to paper yet. If you've started writing and you're stuck, you have done a brilliant job for me, and it absolutely works for that scenario too. So I wasn't expecting that.
That's nice. That's cool. I mean, so great. I think I don't know if there's more you wanted to add, particularly.
I don't think so. I think I've gone as far as I can in this scenario. So, but if you've
I think I already had some ideas, obviously, and you've helped really give me some, insights into some extras. I know because I joined your book challenge recently that you often recommend, bit by bit, write, scheduling time to write type of thing with people. I'm not kind of like that in my style, but I booked a weekend. I've reserved a weekend that I'm going to go and hit this. Hard, if you like, to sort of break the back of this updated book. So I've already kind of earmarked it in my diary. I'm going to do that. It's a kind of a retreat. What I do is I go on my own to a nice place, and it's kind of crazy because I won't eat unless I've done certain activities for my book. I reward myself with eating nice food and a bit of wine. But I won't allow myself to do it unless I've achieved certain objectives. So I could go home at the end of the weekend very hungry or very, very full. So I'm looking forward to that. That's my personal style. And I know somebody else who was on the same call has taken up 4 hours from 4 a.m. in the morning, 1 day a week as a preferred style. But I think the most important thing is to put some time away, whether you're a bit by bit person, an hour a day type, or whether you're a 4 hours per week or a weekend every now and again type of person. And I know what kind of person I tend to be. So I'll certainly break the back of it with the weekend, but I know I need to, just spend more time outside of that too. And when I write my articles for YPN magazine, for example, which are roughly 1,500 words a piece, they're normally done within 2 hours, unless I'm doing a lot of research. If I'm doing research, it's longer. But if I'm kind of just talking, and if I do a podcast episode, it might be 3,000 words per episode, which can be covered off in half an hour to 45 minutes. So
yeah, it's funny, isn't it? But I guess the good thing about if you're writing a business or non-fiction book, then usually it's something we know what we're writing about. So it's not like fiction where we're having to think about plot and character development and story arcs and all that kind of stuff. So that means that we can write it faster. But it is important, whichever way works for you, whether it's, if like you need to schedule off a couple of days or whatever to really break the back of it, or whether you're someone who needs to schedule in an hour a week or a day a week or whatever it is. schedule it in, because if it's just on your to-do list, it tends to just go right down to the bottom and not ever get done.
It's like the urgent versus important thing, isn't it? So
yeah, definitely.
So, Helen, brilliant. I won't sort of draw it out any longer. Just thank you so much for that. I think I wanted to give maybe our watchers and listeners a flavour of, this is particularly for a book, but I know you help people with other forms of content, and you can help people get unstuck if they're blocked. You can help people make a start by following the structures that you have. You probably have other ways in which you can help people. Perhaps would you summarize maybe how you can help people and how people could get hold of you if they're interested in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be delighted to. So I can help people with their general business content, or with their book writing, and it's all about not feeling overwhelmed anymore and finding a path ahead so you can actually make progress. So it's breaking it down into manageable chunks. It's me giving people the structure and tools to actually get stuff done, and also some support and accountability, which more carrot than stick, but I think it is important. So people can either find me on LinkedIn, it's Helen Pollock, or they can check out my website, which is www.thecontentdoc.com. And on LinkedIn, I often share tools, worksheets, loads of good stuff to help people write better.
I can vouch for that. You absolutely do. And I know you've got other, you can even help people who just don't even want to write it for themselves. I know that you do that too. So it's been brilliant. Thanks for taking me through that process. You were gentle with me. I know you could have taken me further into certain areas, but I've got some really good takeaways there. So thanks for the free coaching. But thanks for joining me again as ever, Helen. It's great to see you, and for all the sharing for our community. Hopefully they've got some good content out of that too, which they can take away and apply for their own businesses.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope people find it useful. Bye for now.
Bye bye, Helen. Bye bye.